Yes, so we start the last day. Hello, hola, and salam to you all. Yesterday's brainstorming session was so enriching, and I truly hope it can open the door to new and meaningful collaborations. Thank you, Shift, for bringing us together, and thank you, Swedish Arts Council, for Artistic Freedom for your sponsor. Working on a digital platform brings its own challenges, and I truly thank VFAIR for the technical support on every step of the way, making the entire experience go so smooth and pleasant. We enter our last day finally. We open today with a very important discussion on archivism and oral history in relation to artistic freedom and resistance, exploring the meanings and practices of archives born from such struggles. The session aims to connect academics and art practitioners, fosters mutual support, and uncover new paths to safeguard materials and testimonies from artists and caseworkers. With that, I welcome Dr. Daniel Gadd, a cultural policy researcher. He has been the managing director of UNESCO. His work focuses on artistic freedom, international cooperation, sustainability, and transformative power of the art. He heads the Arts Rights Justice Academy and Library. And don't forget to check the booth and the amazing work they do there. So over to you, Daniel. You take the floor and introduce the panelists.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rita. Hello, everybody out there. It's, of course, would be much more a pleasure to meet you all in presence, but also we all know that due to all of the restrictions out there with the challenges, closed borders, funding of mobility, etc., of course, it's super great to be able to meet online. Also because beside meetings like this, so very important Safe Havens conference, it's so important to be networking all the year through. And so online, of course, gives us abilities which are really helpful, which we still are in finding out how we can use it in the best form for our different forms of work. It's my big pleasure to moderate this session. First of all, I have to apologize. Frederick Elk became ill. You know, Frederick is the one person in the center surrounded by so many other great people bringing in this Safe Havens conference together. Normally he wanted to moderate and unfortunately he's not able to do so. And so he asked me to do, and it's of course a big pleasure. As Rita already said, I'm a researcher. I'm based at a university which is very much interested to be very close to the practical challenges, the practical concerns of artists, artist production, etc. I'm managing director of a UNESCO chair, which is very much more and more focusing on how do we need to rethink funding structures, also other structures, including the question of archives and collecting knowledge from a post-colonial perspective. And I think this will be, in a way, also a crucial relation in our discussion today. Some 10 years ago, there were several people from the artistic freedom world, let's say, from different initiatives who were searching for a university partner to establish a training platform or training workshop, etc. So there were Todd Lester, Marianne de Vlieg, and also the staff of ICORN, Elizabeth and Helge, and also other people who were searching for how can we come together to widen our expertise, to train ourselves, to include new generations into the long years experience of those people who are working in that field since many years. How can we include people who are, outside of the closer community, who have to be integrated into strategies, concepts, methods, how to work in this struggling field of artistic freedom. And so we had the big pleasure to start with the first pilot, let's say, the Arts Rights Justice Academy, where we assembled arts managers, for instance, those who run the Icon Safe Havens residencies, but also other arts managers and curators, administrators in that field, who are in relation to the field of artistic freedom. We also had human rights defenders, also lawyers who are related to the field of artistic freedom and also wider cultural topics. And we had artists who, beside their pure artistic work, feel close to activist work, to political engagement, or also to think about, rethink culture policy structures, support structures, if governmental, non-governmental, or any other form. And so we had a great diversity of very different expertise in the room, of very different regions in the room, different backgrounds. And when you do a workshop, you also think about what is the right methodology, what is the knowledge we need to relate to. Very quickly there was in the room, we need something like a reader and a collection of the most important documents. And we started this reader. It included very quickly reports, analysis, definitions, also toolkits and guidelines. There's a lot of material produced for the very practical, very non-academic, related to the real daily life concerns. And so this reader very quickly turned out to be an online drive. And then we started, well, why restricted to this few people attending in the Arts Rights Justice Academy? We have to open this knowledge. We need to start a process how to bring people together with such material. And so the Arts Rights Justice Library was born. And so it's focusing on a global access. It should be one place because material is so, here and there and sometimes difficult to find. Following the idea to give access to the most relevant documents, which is directly related to the question, who's making this decision, what is relevant and what not. And it was also related to the situation in Germany, being aware of the need of artistic freedom and freedom of opinion, etc. So in focusing on having access to a safe server where we can host those documents, over many, many years. Although we know the threat of right-wing populist movements is spreading everywhere, including Germany. Finally, and then I stop talking and hand over to our first person to talk about, there are open questions. Is this library really visible? Do the right people know about the existence of this library? Is the shape of the website, is it the right one? Do we give orientation to go through this many documents which are stored there already and more are coming in? It's text only right now. Is that still the right approach? Do we need to include pictures, videos, audios? There's a lot which we could do. It's based in Europe. When you go into the colonial debate, there is a criticism on why do we store knowledge of the world in Europe? So how can we deal with this issue? English only is the next topic. Language diversity is so super important. It's related to access, to expression, etc. So there's also a big construction work in that field. So this is a process. We do not want to decide on our own how to continue. We want to integrate. And so I'm very thankful actually for this session today. And that's right now from my side. Once again, please, I think you got a note. If you have questions, comments, etc., use the chat room and etc. And now it's my big pleasure to hand over to Armando. And I think it's best if he introduces himself because then he finds the best words to do so. Please, Armando.
Oh, thank you very much for this conference. My name is Armando Lulay, and I'm an artist and filmmaker based in Tirana. My presentation today is about a very particular archive, which is a war crime archive an archive of atrocities. You'll see the picture in the screen, and the implication and challenges we face when we deal with these types of archives. Everybody knows that today we are surrounded by wars, by genocides that we can't help but see, as they are on every social media platform available to us. So I'll try to, please try, to imagine archiving this kind of images, archiving the extermination, the famine, every sequence of these medieval atrocities we're enduring. I want you to think about the recent wars, to think about Gaza, and to think of the use of this material. If during the Second World War, for example, everyone was searching, and I'm a filmmaker, and I was searching as well for the hidden Holocaust film, the archive's holy grail, this non-existent film, today I think we are all in possess of this kind of film. These are just some of the concerns I would like us to reflect on, addressed to all of us, as I tell you the story of a war crime archive and of an archivist who spent more than 20 years building it and committing itself to preserving it. The historical summary of this archive begins in the Kosovo War. Everybody knows that the Kosovo War was fought between the forces of the former Yugoslavia and the Kosovo Liberation Army. It began in February 98. It ended in June 99 with the intervention of the NATO. During the war, less than 1 million people were displaced, and around 13,518 people were killed. Of those, more than 10,000 people were from Kosovo, and more than 2,000 people were from the Serbian population and army. The idea of building a war crime archive came in the mid-2000s to a very young boy from a small village in Kosovo who had lost many family members in the war, including his sister. He began collecting footage documenting the atrocities of the war. He started it by collecting short clips found online, searching for his family members. Actually, he was searching mostly for his sister's death. Then he decided to search for original videos shot by locals, foreign TVs, television and film crews, the KLA itself, or even the Serbian army. During this very long journey, he slowly began to articulate the idea of an archive and managed to convince most of the people he contacted who were in possession of this picture or videos that his sole goal was to create a war crime archive, something his government had never considered doing. It is well known, but all the scholars and journalists, filmmakers, etc., that Kosovo War was a war in which the documentation of war crimes was massive because it was done by everyone, by the population itself, and for the sole purpose to be transformed into a weapon against the atrocities, against the aggressors. In more than 20 years, he collected thousands of pictures and more than 5,000 hours of footage, which is stored in his room. The pictures and the videos clearly show atrocities of all kinds, atrocities made to children, the elderly, and women. He was shocked by the negligence of the Kosovo authorities in collecting and preserving this archive. So the archivist, now over 40, still insists that through his work, people do not forget the past and live in a present shrouded in oblivion. So everybody knows that the government, the Kosovo government, so everybody knows in Kosovo actually that they cannot undertake any such initiative, and that such initiative could be seen as a provocation against the Serbian state and further jeopardize Kosovo's path toward democratization and multi-ethnical state. So this impossibility reflects not only his personal trauma, but the trauma of the entire nation. On a final note, I followed this archivist and this archive for many years, and studying him and studying his archives, I sensed something revolutionary in the work he was doing, He teaches that oblivion can never repair history, and only tenacious and lasting universal resistance against organized silence can have any meaning of history and justice. When images exist, like those that reach us on a daily basis on our social media platforms, those we use to not see and to not watch many times, we are forced not to forget. Yet, forgetting, rewriting, hiding seems to be the path to a coordinated political future. Forgetting becomes impossible as long as we have this material, which will emerge now or in the future, perhaps with even more traumatically. The archivist, this kind of archivist, wants to use memory as a weapon for shared repair. He fears that his archive will be stolen from his room, will be burned, and the videos will be destroyed forever. That is why, without his consent, no one can enter his room, which will remain closed every time. He suffers from trauma, physical tremors, and sleep disorder. So the archive, he has become part of this archive. This is an archive which haunts the archivist, and the archivist haunts the archive as well. Today, this archive is still kept in his room, but there is something very particular he did. He worked during these 20 years to digitize it. He made copies. He also told me that copies are kept in 2 other countries. If anything were to happen to his archive, to his room where the archive is kept, there will be a backup somewhere else. And he chose 2 states to archive it. Strangely, Germany and the United States. Not yet an institutional archive and not yet an official history, this immense archive requires essential basic reading, not only as an archival practice, but as an historical one. And there are some questions I want to raise, and I'm still raising while searching and researching this archive. How can this material be used to ensure justice is done? Could this material be educational inside an institution? And if so, how? How should it be displayed? And what are the ethical and legal implications we face when working with such an archive? How this archive can be used for nation-building identity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Armando, for this very important approach and really showing that the archives from my understanding, we directly see a relevance that we need to think about the existence of archives, but also, of course, the question of how to use those archives. So
Absolutely.
later on, we should go back to you ended with questions or with remarks, and so I'm directly happy to get back to this in some minutes. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome Yonida. Please also introduce yourself with your own words. You can do it much better than myself.
Thank you, Daniel. Can you hear me? Wonderful. So my name is Yonida Gashi. I am a senior researcher at the Center for Art Studies in the Academy of Sciences of Albania. And I want to thank Frederick very much for inviting me to be a part of this panel, and Daniel, as I said, for moderating. I am going to use my time slot to talk very briefly about the Center for Artistic Documentation, or the CAD, which is a long-term project for the creation of an archive of documentary material pertaining to the emergence and evolution of the Albanian contemporary art scene in the post-socialist period. Specifically, I will talk about the set of questions that I've been grappling with as a result of my involvement in this project, especially during its early stages, which was between 2020 and 2023. These are questions about the ways in which the multiple and interlinked crises we are faced with as this historical juncture, from the rise of right-wing populism and genocide to, of course, the climate crisis, can challenge the definition of what an archive is and what archival work consists of, and how we can turn this into a positive condition. Now, there were 2 reasons why working on the CAD project threw the connection between contemporary capitalist society and crisis into stark relief for me and for my team. The disastrous implications of this connection in particular. Firstly, there was the fact that the goal of building this archive of documentary material pertaining to the emergence and evolution of the Albanian contemporary art scene was explicitly framed in terms of the destruction and plundering of Albanian archives during the country's transition from the state socialist to the neoliberal capitalist system in the 1990s, a turbulent time marked by profound crises, most notably the financial crisis of 1997, which we can talk more about during the overflow. The second reason was the fact that much of the work for building the CAD archive took place against the background of not one, but two additional, if you will, disasters. And these were the 6.4 magnitude earthquake that struck Albania on November 26, 2019, and the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously, which took off in early 2020. Though the latter were natural as opposed to man-made disasters, the management of their fallout globally, in the case of the pandemic, highlighted the way in which neoliberalism exploits natural disasters as well as unstable political or economic situations for profit, what Naomi Klein has referred to as disaster capitalism. Working on the CAD archive against this background of external devastation and the longer history of violence to which it was connected gave rise to a series of questions about the meaning and purpose of archival work in the context of what many thinkers today have described as the apocalyptic horizon of late capitalist society. And I think that the most pertinent of these questions can be formulated as follows. When things are no longer, or at least not only, collected for posterity, i.e. for the scholars of the future, so that they may assist them in the interpretation of the past, which is not an impossible or even an unlikely scenario, since the coming of the future, that the creation and expansion of the archive is typically predicated on may, in our case, never occur. Or in other words, when the archive is no longer seen exclusively as a tool for reading or rereading the past, might it not also become an active mechanism for understanding and reconfiguring the present? These questions got me thinking about the ways in which the CAD archive and the archive in general might function as an apparatus or as a dispositif, as the French say, for revealing the catastrophic dimension of neoliberal capitalism. And the collection within the CAD archive that best exemplifies this ethos, and you are seeing some images of that collection on your screens, is that of the National Theatre protest, which documents the efforts of Albanian activists, artists, cultural workers, and concerned citizens to protect the building of the Albanian National Theatre, an important national heritage site, from demolition. Because the demolition project entailed the transfer of public land for private development, illegally and without consultation with stakeholders, I might add, the struggle to defend the National Theatre became synonymous with the rejection of an urban politics that had at its core the remaking of public space in line with the values of neoliberal capitalism, by filling it, public space that is, with overpriced apartment blocks and retail spaces that afford a consumerist experience. The Albanian government managed to finally demolish the National Theatre after 2 years of continuous protests under cloak of night, using the restrictions that had been passed in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic in the early hours of May 17, 2020, using overwhelming police force in the process. This was also documented by the protesters, many of whom were beaten and arrested. Indeed, the meticulous way in which the protesters documented everything that they did as they did it suggests a heightened awareness of the risk that they might ultimately not succeed in their mission to defend the National Theatre. One could read this premature documentation as a sign of pessimism and even defeatism. However, I am inclined to read it as a sign of necessary pragmatism. Rather than postponing the historicization of the protest to an unspecified point in the future, which might never come anyway, it recuperates and mobilizes the archive in order to transform it from a tool of deferred justice in the future into a tool of resistance in the present. Because there is no doubt that even though demolished, the National Theatre protest continues to serve as a source of encouragement to keep on resisting and keep on struggling. Thank you. I hope I kept to my 5 minutes.
Thank you, Yoni.
You're welcome.
We got another very brief, very intensive impression of when we think about archives, what actually are we talking about? And just one aspect I noted here, which we should also use in our discussion later on, is also the question of for what moments do we create archives, you know? Because there is so much so quickly in the room, the question, do we need this archive for today? Do we need it for our work tomorrow? And maybe there are a lot of influential people or others as well who do not think about this is not the question, you know. An archive, many archives of today are looking back into the past, and a lot of artists, a lot of researchers and others are very thankful for those information from the past when, for instance, such a building is not at all existing anymore, and there might not be any sign for that what had been here and how this struggle had looked like. So the moment when this archive will be used is not the question. It might be somewhere in the future. But just as a side comment to store for our discussion, now it's my pleasure to hand over to our third speaker, SORAYUT. Please also introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, everyone. My name is SORAYUT AIEM-UEAYUT from Chiang Mai University, Thailand. So thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of these panels, because it's very excited to talk about on your question, Daniel. Do we need archive today? My presentation today is, yes, we need archive today because we need to re-narrating the past, because the past is the rhyme of the contested rhyme. We need to grab the past and reinterpret the past to open the space for ordinary people. My talk today will start with the problematizations of the Cold War in Thailand. When we talk about the Cold War in Thailand, I think this is almost 4 decades, starting from 1950 to 1992. For me, in my perspective, this period of time is the very mystic period in Thailand, the most mystic period in Thailand, because at that time, so many people saw the group of power try to reinterpret their own history, try to re-narrating the past and position themselves. Particularly the royal monarchy, they used this term to reinterpret the modern nation narrative that's based on the royal family and military powers. So in the academic landscape, we call this term as the royal nationalisms or the monarchical nationalism. So that's why we cannot find another versions of archive in the officially. And that's why we need to doing archive from the people experience. And next slide, please. Yes, we start, we and my team, including Professor Varapon Virangsi from Faculty of Humanities, Department of History. We work in the same project because we need to doing archive as the artwork, and on the other hand, we need to doing the artwork as an archive as well. Me, myself, training as the visual anthropology, and Professor Varapon, she's a historian. And next slide, please. I can show you. When we talk about the memories, in Thailand, we don't have any a version of archive that record the people experience. Because when you go back to the archival building in Bangkok or the big province in Thailand, do you see the archive that produced by the royal family or military perspective or elitist perspective? So this is our attention to try to record and maintain and captions and produce archive from the people experience. We went to the fieldwork and worked with the farmer families who used to be the Communist Party before. And why communism matter in Thailand? Because in that period of times during 1974 and 1977, that period is a bit it was very hard for the ordinary peoples. Some ordinary peoples, like some farmer, they was like pushed, and some royal family grab their land and push them, treat them as the labor in their own land. So that's why they need to fight back to the Thai nationalism, and then they join the Communist Party in the jungles. And we archive that experience for almost 3 years in the jungles. And at that time, they didn't have any photography because they came from ordinary people's farmer family. It's quite different from the student leaders and the higher position of the Communist Party. They always archive themselves all the time, and they try to re-narrate about the communism movement in Thailand and also Southeast Asia. So when we try to see the world through the eyes of the ordinary peoples, we have to fight in the 2 layers. First, in the layer of the mainstream or the master plot of the Thai nationalism. And the second, we have to make a great dialogue to the Communist Party and the communist narrative in Thailand as well. So this is a bit hard for our project, And next slide, please. So sometimes we try to absorb and apply some methodology, like a drawing methodology, to be a part of our film as well, because drawing as a part of materializing the memories that never be visualized. For some reason, we talk to them and we apply this method and work with them, and we invite them to be a co-narrators and co-curators in our film as well. We produce so many portraits and the painting, and we invite the local people and farmer family members to be a part of curate our work as well. And next slide, please. Yeah, and sometime we found the untold story as well, because when we use the methodology like oral history and a micro history and the audio visual archive methodology, that led us to found something like untold story in our society. In that pictures, the Thai government, in cooperation with the United States Army, they used napalm bomb along the Thailand and our neighborhood border. This is like never record in the official archive, but we found something like untold story, and this came from a woman experience as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, sure. When they went back from the jungles, everything had changed, and we also archiving their experience after the jungle life as well, because their life in the Thailand after the Cold War, there's still the problem and crisis in Thailand still be the same things, and they also join the political movement at the current time as well. So that's why archiving the past that's quite important for the current situation, because when the ordinary people re-narrating themselves, they can reposition themselves again in the current situation. This is why archiving a memory is quite important for today. This is my talk today.
Thank you, SORAYUT, for this perspective into your country and the very situation in your country. And I think here's also something, there's a lot to talk, but just if I may grab out of one aspect here, which is this question of identities, especially in a plural, related to the question, and this might be, we all might be related to this, about the question how to deal with nation states and dominances in terms of creating identity and community, etc., which directly can very quickly lead, and you gave us very impressive perspective into this, can lead into suppression, and that people cannot follow the identity concept they would prefer to follow. So, and we see that there's also a very strong relation to the question of documentation, archiving in this field, and using such archives, as you said, today and tomorrow, and not wait for so many years. So now it's my pleasure to hand over to our next and last in this round speaker, Karin. Please also introduce yourself briefly.
Yes, thank you very much, Daniel. So I am a researcher. My name is Karin Sakari, and I'm a researcher in human rights, primarily human rights history from a social and political movement perspective. And I work a lot with photography as archival source materials and as a method. So if the first slide, right. So I have experience working in an authoritarian context in Thailand as SORAYUT, with historical and contemporary state violence and repression of dissent. So within the frame that SORAYUT talked about, the royal nationalist main narrative. And there I work with visual productions, lacunas in state archives, with private repositories and social movements archival and visual interventions in history, activating documentation from past and recent past atrocities. And I also work with academic freedom issues in Thailand and repression of academic and cultural expression. So that is what brought me to what I will be talking about today. So when students around the world began protesting for Palestine, in Sweden, this started with solemn walkouts and careful call for boycott of Israeli academia. At that moment, the university didn't say or do much. Students as well as lecturers were left to their own devices. Some staff, admin and academic, formed networks around universities in Sweden, and we formed one at Lund University. And we met to support each other, connect with other similar groups nationally, etc. At this time, the Swedish government is right-wing with support from a nationalist party that is rooted in a Nazi organization, and this matters quite a bit. The Minister of Education is from the Liberal Party, but he was an outspoken supporter of Israel. Early on, the Minister of Education called upon the university vice-chancellors, in practice gagging them, telling them they were not to, quote-unquote, perform international relations, and that they could not allow anyone taking a stance for Palestine from within universities. All vice-chancellors after this moment spoke concertedly in relation to the movement. But when students all over Sweden coordinated encampments to begin on the 14th of May 2024, the universities acted differently from each other and showed a bit more autonomy. At Lund University, the leadership did not enter into dialogue with the students and decided to call the police to rid the encampment after 2 weeks. And the reason for this was to use the space for an academic tradition, the promotion of new doctors. Several students ended up in custody, resulting in lawsuits and fines for disobedience. The decision to rid the encampment and allowing police violence against students were met with loud protests from faculty. After the event, the central administration made no effort to meet the students. They did not see the consequences of their actions, and they did not want to enter into a dialogue about what the university could and should do about the conflict. At no point did the university management turn to the academic staff for advice or guidance in relation to any of the questions that were activated by the encampment. They did not turn to the academic staff for advice on Palestine, Israel, on social movements, police tactics, not to academic staff on to how to understand the visual politics of the encampment, etc. So then we were a group of staff that asked the Vice-Chancellor to do a few things that we thought were needed for the students' feeling of safety and respect, for the work environment, and for the university's reputation. And that included resuming dialogue, establish an independent truth commission, laying everything on the table, not just the documentation from the central admin. And we did this to ensure that students' right to peaceful assembly and association was respected, and to revise repressive policies that targeted the pro-Palestine solidarity movement. So we also proposed demands in relation to Palestinian scholars, students, and Israeli institutions. And we did this because we thought we have responsibilities as academics. We thought we had responsibilities to respect knowledge production, respect our students, take responsibility for their safety at the university campus, but also responsibility for the role of academia in society, for academic freedom, and for the university campus as a space that is part of the city and society. But we met a dead end, and therefore we came up with this idea to create an archive as something constructive. Next slide, please. So why this archive? We thought that it would be important that the movement has, like this social movement has a bit more control over how their own history is written, what materials that are left behind, that others can also use in the near or far future to understand this movement's intentions, its expressions, its discourse, to kind of fill those caveats or lacunas that easily appear in state authorities' archives. And this place where the encampment was called Palestina Gård. The place is actually called Lunda Gård, but during these 2 weeks, it was called Palestina Gård. And we thought it should be treated as an historical event, and for that, documentation is central. This was the first time in at least 20 years that politics have been this present at the university, and probably it is only comparable with 1968. This is a public event, politics of the streets seen at the university, and it affected the whole city of Lund. It was an intervention in the city landscape and a rupture in the traditions that bring together spatially and aesthetically the university with the city. On top of this, we thought it was a politically significant reconfiguration of the left movement in Sweden, where questions about racism in Swedish society have been come to the forefront. It was also important for us to have who had participated to resolve some unexplored experiences and emotions through the source materials collected, through memory work and images. So one part of this was also actually community healing. Of course, one thing that I mentioned in the beginning was also to hold the management accountable. So this archive could perhaps work in such a way where the management did not want to present, did not want to enter into dialogue and lay on the table everything that had happened. So part of this is, of course, also to the possibility of seeking accountability. Then we also found that in all the anger and frustration, we needed a bit of joy. And we thought that this was really worth spending time on. So it also gave us joy to work with. But central to this is, for us, is the countering here, the counter archive, that we are working with multiple narratives of what has happened in relation to the university, in relation to the Swedish public, and all of those things that have not been officially recorded. So this working with this archive has kind of helped us reclaim the university as a space, as a democratic space for freedom of expression, and including aesthetic aspects of that. And so it was an action towards the university, but it was also an action for ourselves and for not forgetting the role of the university in relation to Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karin, for this additional example within our common subject. I think it's also through this example becoming clear how important it is to continue with dialogue, to continue with communication, to continue with disagreements, of course, including that this needs to follow a respectful interaction. I just, when you were explaining about your case, I was thinking of, in a way, similar situations we were and still do face at the University of Hildesheim in Germany, of course, being related in this very specific situation due to the German history and the German responsibility in this whole context. And at the same time, I can just again underline it's we need to continue to talk, to exchange, and this is part of freedom of expression and a democratic value-based understanding that there is not one narrative. There is so quickly disagreements, and if we stay respectful with each other, and we had different forms of not being respectful with each other at our campus. Of course, then we end into fields where there might be a growing understanding of there are ends of disagreements. But I think you very much show also option how we can how we can do actions related. What you also said is we all have responsibilities. Part of our aim to preserve, to support, to promote artistic freedom and other freedoms of opinion is that need for shared responsibility. So maybe as an opening question for our exchange and discussion, let us stay a minute also at this example from you, Karin. But of course, all the others, please include yourself, because I see so many relations, although every case is very similar, very different and very, very individual. But Karin, when it is about to design projects, to start initiatives which are aiming to widen the sense of a shared responsibility and not to stay silent because a government, a police, whatever authority had told us, no, we should stay silent. For instance, in the specific context of the Middle East conflict or the Gaza catastrophe at the moment, including the catastrophe with October 7, what happened on Israeli ground. Of course, that's part of connected, but of course, we cannot go into this specific conflict. This is not the right place. But what is your idea? How can we encourage people to get a sense for a need for shared responsibility?
That is a very good question, Daniel. And for me, this has been really, I think, one of the really big questions has been this about responsibility, and that is, even if our university vice chancellors follow the lead of the government at the moment, saying you shouldn't activate the knowledge that you have, you shouldn't listen to and you shouldn't even support your own, protect your own students. I thought that has been for me, that's a question about not living up to our responsibilities as academic institutions, and so guiding in the whole process, I think that, okay, it would be wonderful to be able to create an archive that is functioning as a repository, but just as important for us has been the process of this, to talk about why and how you create an archive, and talking about ethical aspects of it. And this has been central. So this is a co-created space, and it was built up as a course, as an extracurricular course for our students, and that was also to be co-created. So the students needed to decide on what they wanted and what they wanted to know. And this is one important aspect of it. Another is that it's also important for us as researchers that this is not an archive created for our own interests. And it is something that the event, if we take seriously that the events were public, we also have to think about the archive as a public interest and something that can be publicly and commonly shared. So it has to be community driven, and it cannot also not be expert from above driven, right? So these are parts of how to take responsibility, I think. And also, of course, all the ethical discussions about how you handle the materials and how you store it, anonymization, longevity, and that sort of questions. But that always comes with archiving, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Karin. All of you others, Sorayut, Jonida, Armando, do you have, would you like to add something to this question of how to spread the sense of a shared responsibility for this approaches?
Thank you very much.
Please.
I'm Daniel, and thank you very much, Karin. You inspire me a lot. For examples, like academic standpoint to work with like current issues. So in my case, I think we have to go back because we live in the different context, right? In Thailand, I think we need to doing more in participatory methods to work with the local peoples, because the memories, I think the memory at the battlefields and the memories at the contested space for the various groups in Thai society, and the memory is in the power dynamic all the time, and who can collect past. That's why, and who can collect the past, reinterpret the past, and that's why they can open the space in the history or historiography. So I prefer to using the participatory method because how to understanding the ordinary people experience. We have to work with them. We have to allow them to tell us and provide them equipment to collect themselves as well. Like to be a part of co-curatorial work as well. It's like that's why I really like audio visual archive work in my field work, because it's quite fun, because we can collect them in daily life, and we can allow them to feel free to be themselves, and they can. Nowadays we have mobile phone, and we have like mobile phone nowadays is like infrastructure too, to like quite close to our daily life, and we work with them and we train them and teach them to collect their experience as well. Yeah.
Thank you, SORAYUT.
I could say a few words, yeah.
Please.
Well, I mean, as I said, the activists and the artists and all the protesters who were involved in the National Theatre protest, they were keenly aware that what they were doing had a sort of historical significance. They documented everything and produced copious amounts of documentation. So very soon, practically after the theater was demolished, there was this question about what to do with this material, where to put it, you know. And the problem is, I mean, it's tricky, and this is where these participatory models, I think, were in danger of romanticizing them a little bit too much, you know, because a lot of different people have a lot of material. And what we have in the Center for Artistic Documentation is a tiny fraction. And it is actually a real struggle to gather everything in one place, because while everybody understands the value of the material, they have very different visions about where it should be deposited, how it should be deposited, you know, what kind of degree of involvement the activists involved in the process should have in the organization of the archive. So it's actually, these are very tricky processes to which we do not necessarily have an answer yet. But on the other hand, we're, of course, as an archive, we're completely dependent on donations. So on the goodwill of the activists, the protesters, and their faith in us that we will take good care of the material. And obviously we're a public institution, so that's an important element because it guarantees access by the wider public to the material. But yeah, it's very, I mean, one interesting element of working on this archive has been the very competing visions that the people involved in the protests had about what where it should go and what people should be doing with it. They are really competing and conflicting, and they do not always agree. And of course, there have been fallouts in the years since. You know, some people don't like each other anymore. So it's actually really really tricky, but this makes it, I guess, all the more compelling and interesting to bring all of this material together.
Sorry, I have to turn on the microphone. Well, where to continue? Let us focus a bit on this issue of eyewitnesses or time witnesses, if this is the right word in English. You know, coming from Germany, this whole question of the Second World War, the Nazi regime, and the whole Holocaust issue is a very crucial one in the German society. And so when I grew up, there were a lot of possibilities to listen to eyes and time witnesses, very much focused on those people who had been the victims within concentration camps and other restrictions, etc., etc. And unfortunately, as years are passing by, those persons are not with us anymore. Only very few actually are left. And so there is right now in Germany the big question: how can we preserve this? Because it's such an important, vivid moment to get an understanding of what has happened in this society and what should never happen again. And a friend of mine who is a German filmmaker it's coming into the cinemas right now. This is not commercial. It's more like just an example. In addition to this, he made a documentary about, it's called The Unspoken, where he is interviewing Germans who did not talk after the Second World War, because, you know, this was the majority in Germany. It was the strategy of how to deal with shared responsibility towards this issue of Holocaust and everything around that, because there was so much silent agreement in the German society, which most probably is also a huge challenge in every society, every country in the world. It's very like there are still a lot, like, because this is 10, 20, 30 years later, there are a lot of eye and time witnesses who now start, because they're in their last period of life, if I may say so, start to open up their mind and their thought to now speak and not continue with the unspoken. What comes up in your mind when you think about, when I listen to you, to your very different examples, this is so much about trying to be close to those people who have been in that very situation, who went through this struggle, who finally, as you said, Junida, started also to fight, although they have something in common. But well, part of disagreements and different thinking approaches leads into some kind of fight, of course, but how can we link the need of archives, the design of archives, to this need of trying to stay as close as possible to this very real situation which has happened and which now is past? Who would like to start? Maybe I could hand over to, if he's still in the room, I don't see him, Armando. When Armando and I were talking, you told me that what you observe in the Kosovarian society is that there is no interest in what has happened. That people, maybe it's similar to the situation in Germany after the Second World War, although the situation is totally not the same. It's more the other way around. No, it's too short to explain. But
yeah, I understand.
The missing interest, how to deal with that.
I mean, we have this example, which is this guy, the archivist that I described before, he's doing it alone, actually. And this is a perfect example of what is going on in society, and it's a perfect example why people are fighting, what to do with this archive, And that's why I see his work as a very revolutionary one, In Kosovo, there are people who wants to forget, All the witnesses wants to forget, although he has all these videos, and he's keeping them in his room, So I think it's not about the witness in the past anymore, but it's about the present and what we are going to do in the future. We have wars, we have genocide that is going on right now, and all we do is like talking, blah, 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 and how to archive this and how to archive that. There's no action, I see, So that's a big problem, That's a big problem. We are taking too much time in talking and not solving anything. So that's why I think that the way he approaches the archive, the Kosovo man, it's something like unique somehow. So he said, and I'm going to use a word, fuck you all, I'm going to do it like this. So that's a big remark, So, and I'm thinking a lot about this, and how to turn it into a more knowledgeable and more not I mean how to show it to the world, a kind of process that I really like. Of course it's very on the margin, but it reflects on our society and this need to talk, to explain, and not do a really good job. I don't know how to put it.
So my impression also is that related to the existence of this conference, the Safe Havens Conference, this is at least my definition of it, or my understanding is that we meet to exchange and then go at least a small next step towards, there is something we want to be solved. We need an idea for a next step, a next action. I think when we briefly think about this video archive Armando was talking about, of course, the thought that this is relevant for any kind of legal clarification is very clear. So to protect it because of this aim is we don't have to discuss much about that. So there maybe it's more, but it's about the question of how to save it, to store it. We heard about that already, some strategies, and of course, there are most probably also needed actions to what kind of legal clarifications be done related to it. But when we want to relate it to, and Michael Schmidt mentioned something in the chat room, which is like indicators of the health of society, could we say that if a society, if a government, if ordinary people, if those who are thinking about educational concepts, who are thinking about how do we need to guide the being together, the democratic being together, etc., if they are not interested, is that a clear indicator of an ill society? So what is the treatment, in a way, to go a next step? Because this is how you ended, Armando. How can we include such an archive, which is not easy to handle because of its content? How can we include this into an educational approach? Maybe focusing on different target groups, but maybe also, where possible, including children of whatever age, but what do you have in mind? Karin, SORAYUT, Yonida, but also our extended audience, what can we collect for Armando to give him an idea? Yeah, it's this is why we talk,
Please shoot.
I want to go back to something that Daniel said in the beginning about decolonial perspectives on archives, right? And what I've kind of come across when working both in Thailand and then now trying to work with in Sweden is the question of uneven resources, right? And thinking about the purpose, rather thinking about the bigger common good as a purpose of archives, right? Than thinking only through the national context. So in Thailand, we have the case where there are lacunas in the state archive because of ideology, but also because of a lack of resources. So there's also one way of working with the decolonial perspective is, of course, to provide resources and to move into a digital space, archival materials and so on. So what I'm thinking about is how to create an infrastructure that is not state dependent, that is not EU dependent, but is still transnational, international, global, community based. To make the history of the history is of one nation that has suffered such atrocities is the history of all neighboring nations and the world, right?
Correct.
So I think I do agree with Karin, and the thing that I can add more is about we need to work in between the disciplinary, like art and anthropology, artistic practice, and historians. We have to work together like a multidisciplinary to create a new genre of the archive. For example, in Thailand, why archivists matter for today? Because we live in so many ideological legacy for this time. For me, I start with the post-Cold War because we live as the Cold War legacy. And why didn't we start with the post-Cold War legacy experience? Because for so many ordinary people, they are not a submissive actor right now. They need us to help them and encourage them and like empowering them to be a part of archiving themselves and including the process of the how to publish our archive as well. If we start with the website, if we start with the stock of the knowledge of the data, the problem is how we classify the data. And the taxonomy is quite more important in this process. If we are the professional archivist, we already have so many instance category, But if we work with them and open the space for them to classify the data from their own experience, I think it's quite very challenging in our work as well. Challenging is not too difficult. Challenging is like something that open the new possibility to think outside the box. But I do agree with Jonida as well when you talk about like, okay, when we work with the people, how many level and how we know we can understanding the experience from the people point of view. I know that process is quite challenging in our fieldwork as well. But in my case in Thailand, we start with the state violence experience. For the people who live in the state violence for a long time, almost 4 decades, they have something in their mind like minor voice of the history, and they need to challenge something wrong, something that's wrong in Thai society as well. They share some idea, even though they came from the different context, even though they came from the different culture, they speak with the different local dialect, but they share the experience. So that's why I think we need to work with them for some point and recreating the classifications of the data when we publish our archive to the public to challenge the master plot or the grand narrative of the Thai nationalism, in my case. Yep.
But I think it's there are parallelisms with the example that Armando mentioned, because the reason why nobody is interested in the war in Kosovo has to do directly with geopolitics. I mean, it's not a mystery, It's not like people forgot. It was very recent, It has to do with geopolitics. Essentially, it whether we like it or not, for better or for worse, Kosovo is a NATO state, and so it's practically an American colony, and the geopolitics dictates that Kosovo and Serbia must get along. Let's forget about the war, happy sailing towards, neoliberal society, and so there is no space because the politics of the day dictates that there should be no space, that it should be left in the past, and there's also this tricky aspect about some territories being exchanged, it gets very messy, and of course both the EU and the US are strong supporters of Serbia as a leader in the region, in the sort of Balkan region. So of course, this archive, with this very strange archive from this very damaged man, goes against the grain of the dominant politics. And in a way, what is sort of very interesting about it is that perhaps he doesn't even have the capacity himself to articulate this necessarily very clearly, but that's besides the point. Anyway, I think the important thing with that archive, me personally, because I'm familiar with it as well, I've and some colleagues of mine have worked on it, written about it. it needs to be made available to a wider audience of specialists and researchers to also to really just go through it. You know what I mean? It's a very closed archive at the moment. That's the problem. It's a closed, essentially really inaccessible archive. You know, so it's both important but inaccessible and closed, both sort of grassroots in the sense that it came from a very simple, ordinary person looking for, you know, working through his trauma, working for deceased family members, but somehow he becomes this sort of little custodian and, you know, of the archive who decides who looks at what, when, you know what I mean? And so these are, you know, these are all problematic issues, I think, you know, and of course he has to believe that whoever is getting access to this archive or a copy of it will take good care of it. But then we're back to the same issue I have with all of these protesters and activists who I'm trying to persuade to give me material, which is, you know, they need to get convinced. You need to convince them that the material will be in good hands, and they have to believe you that it will be in good hands, and so on and so forth, you know. And again, I mean, it's very nice that we talk, and I fundamentally believe in counter archives, community-driven archives, etc., etc. But we should be, I think, very transparent about how that they come with a lot of difficulties, you know, and also ethical dilemmas. You know what I mean? Should this one man control access to all this material? You know, sorry, Armando.
I mean, he wants to donate it only to an institution controlled by the state.
Do you see what I mean? Like it's
about
incredible.
Nations building, you know. It's insane.
But like my protesters want to donate their archive to the state archives, who do not want it. You know, and so I'm like, but we want it, give it to us. We will take good care of it. You know, they're like, nobody belongs in the state archives, but they don't want it. Why?
Yeah.
You know, and
but
it's
also he has a concern as well. He has a request to the state. He should be employed to take care of the archive.
Oh, there you go. See what I mean? Like, I mean, it's
in the state institution, you know. He won't let it go like this, you know. And that's very, very interesting.
You know, and of course with my people, you know, I countless times I have been promised material, they've gone back on their word, not given it to me, changed their minds a million times. It's really challenging, I think.
Big time.
So what I hear is from different angles this question about government, non-government, or what else, you know, how to deal. You know, I'm coming from a government where we have a very strong and broad and super rich funded cultural policy and educational infrastructure, and which is also finally related to why we hosted the Arts Rights Justice Library on a university server, which is very safe, etc. And Karin most probably comes from a similar situation, although you already introduced us into the problematic sides of right-wing shifts within government, which directly are related to this first positive idea of a democratic-based, well-funded governmental structure. So how do we have to deal with, on the one side, we want the government to be included. We try to convince that there is a value, that they should add this into their archive systems. On the other side, we see that in every country in the globe, and the United States is a very prominent example right now for this at least huge fight for where are the ends of freedom and where, you know. So how do we have to deal with including the government and excluding it to protect these different forms of archives?
I mean, I feel strongly, sorry, I'm taking the floor, but I feel strongly about this. I think we have to preserve or recuperate a space for the public from under the government, as it were. I mean, I don't think the answer is to abandon, all state or governmental structures. I think the way is, and is in finding, finding spaces within those structures for preserving the common and the public in the way it should be.
What is your impression, Karin?
Well, I mean, as you said, in Sweden has been very much like Germany and does still have a good, I think, a good structure within the state archives for supporting non-governmental archives and grassroots archives. So we have the people's movements type of archives that are covered by some laws and also can be provided with some infrastructure. What I am worried about from this experience with the past few years and at the universities, and how the current government has not respected the distance between government and authorities like the university, but also is that they wouldn't respect also the independence of archives, and that they are also withdrawing funding from what we call people's education, folkbildning. So that is a goal that the political parties that are in government now have. So looking at Europe and looking at the US and seeing how quickly an authoritarian turn can happen and take place, I would very much like to work more transnationally to create infrastructures that are not dependent on governments, but that can benefit, of course, from positive lawmaking, that can benefit from progressive politics, or politics that understand the value of archives. Because formerly, of course, we've had conservative governments that have respected this, that have seen the value of it, but today we don't. So it's just about being, I think, not dependent, not relying on legal frameworks, not relying on institutional tradition and institutional tradition, basically. Yeah.
So for me, I think we live in the different contexts, particularly at the state power and the censorship. For example, in Southeast Asia and Thailand, the state power has so many network to control the people and doing a censorship any information as well. Particularly in the digital era, they control so many platform, and they work very close to the online application so much, particularly like Facebook and WhatsApp as well, and some application. So we can work with the officials archive, because we need to do it in collaboration. We need to push the minor voice to be be more power and have so many social spaces. But we have to do in concern about a censorship as well. Me, myself, when I was an anthropologist and I worked in the Deep South Thailand before, Deep South Thailand, there's a conflict and a deadly conflict zones. I worked in that area for so many years, almost 2 decades. And when I walk into the archive, National Archive, I guess there's so many documents for sure, but they never allow me to access and read that document. It depends on the state security as well. If we need to collect and bring the minor voice of the history to be more publicity, they will control us for sure. For for example, in some issues that relevant to the state security, and some issue that challenge the master plot or the grand narrative of the nationalism, So that's why I think we have to do concern when we think about the relationship between our working in archive and official version of the archive, because a different context. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you, Sorayut, also for this. Let me grab one question Marianne de Vlieg brought in, which is referring, if I understood it right, to the question of should archives always be directly accessible for everybody, or and this might be related to this question of responsibility, responsibility for a society, what is happening in a society, when is the right moment, So she's asking if in certain situations, maybe Karin, your example is might be related to this. Should your archive be accessible right now, or might it be also the more important, or at least a very important moment be later on, when, as she is saying, a conflict is cooler, or referring to this question to us as, let's say, we are archivists, and what is our responsibility for the right moment? And because, what is your impression here? And I'm sorry, this is the last discussion point, as then we are running out of time. But please.
Yeah, I think that, of course, if it was activated, it has been activated. We had an exhibition at the place, and that was obviously an act of showing it, and as a way of creating friction, and also, So in that way, it was a political activation of the archive. But I also think from ethical points of views, it should not be, not everything that we collect should be made available ASAP, right? Or the beauty with the digitalization is, of course, that you can create copies of something. So images and whatever that shouldn't be made. There's been a big discussion about anonymization, of course, which I am, from an historian's point of view, I'm quite against. From thinking as an academic working at the university and protecting my students, I am very for. So, and of course we can create different layers here. So I'm not sure it is we don't have to decide open completely or closed completely at this moment, right? But definitely owning it completely is important. Not handing it over, and not handing over the decision to others at this point in time.
Let's do a last round on this. Sorry, please.
Yeah, I think I do agree with the questions, but in the hottest situations, we can do a little bit open a space for talking about the archive and bring the archive to be a publicity through the process of the artistic. Because I think I just brought some article for Thailand Biennale in this year, Thailand Art Biennale. So many artists, they work as the ethnographer and work really close to minorities and marginalized people who live in Thailand, and they cannot voice themselves, and they cannot show themselves to the public because it's the sensitive issues. And the artistic work quite important and relevant to this case, because they try to think something like, and redefining what is the archive. The archive is not only a paper, it's not only a photography, but it's about the traces that they can find in the village. And that traces on the sand, on the stone, can talk more about the people history that never exists in Thai society. I think in the hottest era or the situation or in the very sensitive issues, we can talk and we have to talk, but we need to find a new way for bring this voice to the public. And I think the artistic process is quite more important in this context. Thank you.
Thank you, Sorayut. Yonida.
I mean, I will have to agree with both Karen and Sorayut. I don't think that the ability to immediately access absolutely everything necessarily conveys either the political effectiveness of an archive or its democratic value. There are very good reasons why some materials should be kept from being easily accessible. I mean, a good example is the example of the archive Armando mentions. There are, there are images, there are a lot of images of atrocities, there could well be images of individuals whose families perhaps have never looked at those images before, are not aware that they exist. So these are very, very real ethical dilemmas that need to be taken into consideration. I agree with what Sorayut said in the sense that I think the what makes an archive truly democratic and what is its process of constitution, not the illusion of immediate transparency and accessibility. I think that's where you find its democratic value. Like again, and this is reflected, I think, in the archival work I try to champion at my institution. We are generally open. I mean, stuff is not online, but if people are interested, they can approach, and we're generally very, very open. But again, there's this, this ideology that, we want to make the archive democratic in the way in which we build the archive, not in the throwing everything out there.
Yeah, thank you. Armando.
Yes, on the last remarks, I also believe that contemporary art could be a gate to use this kind of approach to the archive, because the artists have an ability, to find a different way to get to the truth. We're not talking about facts, truth, and blah blah blah. I'm talking about how to make people go to this kind of archives, research for this kind of archives. And I believe contemporary art could be a way to approach this strategy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, we always need to keep in mind the strength of the very special abilities of art, different forms of art, so thank you for all of this. I think it was also clear that there were a lot of doors which we would like to have opened. And as Frederick, who is saying hello, by the way, in the chat room, as Frederick was asking, please also think about a continuation. And when we talked in the previous talks already, I think it's obvious we need to think about the structure, how to continue this exchange. It could be maybe something like a consultancy group, somebody's bringing in an issue, for instance, Armando, with the question, how can we include this into any kind of educational program? Yeah. And then we take time for only focus on this one issue, and the next time somebody else has it, which of course should be in a way open for others who would like to be included. Yeah, we will reach out to you. We will also reach out to you as the wider audience, etc. With these ideas, and we should think about this together. This is also our shared responsibility. So thank you. Rita is in the room again. We will be thrown out now because the short break is already shorter than it's mentioned in the program. Thank you, Rita, for handing over.
Thank you so much for this amazing discussion. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all again at 3:15 Central European Time. See you in 10 minutes. Bye-bye.
Bye.